Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining again this wonderful episode of Talking Shit with Heather. Today's special guest is Gregg Kirk, and we'll get more into him and his story and why he's on here in just a minute. Talking shit, why that name? So there's two reasons for that name. One is kind of tongue-in-cheek, and the other one is I am an actual practitioner, and sometimes I get other practitioners on the show, and sometimes we are talking about shit. Actually, one of my highest watched episode to date is the woman who has a coffee enema educational site and supplies online, and that was just an awesome episode that people are still loving. Other reasons for talking shit is I want to bring that shit storm, right? Your shit story out of the dark and into the light, because that's when people can heal. People are, unless awareness is brought to a lot of the reasons why us practitioners got into the field that we're in, right? So, I want those stories to be told so that way people don't feel alone. People are like, oh my God, that's me. I just had a call with a wonderful woman who talked about oxalates and how a sharp tooth of oxalate was coming out of her neck. So I mean, how often do you hear of, the pictures that I showed on this episode were like sci-fi of these little white shards coming out of her skin, so, stuff like that. And I know Gregg's got an awesome story. Gregg's a fellow Limey like myself. And I met him in another Lyme group, and then just right away, like connected with him. I was like, I see you. And he's like, I see you too. And then we got to hang out in Connecticut at a Lyme conference and just had a blast and just fell even more in love with him and what he's doing. And, same tide raises all ships. And I love connecting with really awesome, like-minded practitioners, especially those who do things that I can't do, so he's really tuned into the energetic piece to a lot of this stuff, which is just beautiful. And I hope to someday develop those skills. But as of right now, I help professional, motivated women with Lyme who are over being told their health issues are in their head. I help them to reduce chronic pain, address embarrassing gut issues, and conquer brain fog naturally so they can get back to having a joy-filled, productive life. So that is what I do at Discovering Health. But we're going to talk about Mr. Gregg Kirk. Take it away, Gregg.
Thank you, Heather, for inviting me. And hello to your audience. I got sick from Lyme all the way back in probably 2002, 2003, and went 2 years undiagnosed. And at the time I was, in the healing arts, we call a normie. I was a normal guy. Eating quote unquote normal food, like the American diet of Burger King and things like that, and drinking Diet Cokes and drinking beer. I was what's that?
You call it the SAD diet, the standard American diet.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah. Unfortunately, yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on who you talk to. I don't think that shouldn't be the American standard diet, but for a lot of people it is. But anyway, so I was living a normal life, working a job, just got married, had a kid coming up, and there's a bunch of stressors in my life that I wasn't aware of and I never had before in my life. And I started having some symptoms. And even in the Lyme world, at least initially, I wouldn't consider these like classic Lyme symptoms. So they were more gut related. So I would eat a meal and then feel like I was on drugs for a bit. Or I would get major fatigue and have to go take a nap, like in the middle of the day. Or I get, migraines, or all the above. And I remember telling my wife, like, wow, if I could just get my food intravenously, I'd be fine. Like it's just whenever I eat, I would not feel well. So, I started chasing those symptoms with doctors, and, I'll just be brief about it because this story has been told a million times. But for those in the Lyme world, this whole cycle of being diagnosed can last for decades. Luckily, mine only lasted for 2 years, but that's still a long time. And I live in Connecticut where they discovered Lyme disease. So you would think that would be top of mind, but it was not. Top of mind were heart disease, diabetes, cancer, those kind of things. And when I tested negative for those, the doctor said two things. One, your symptoms aren't life-threatening, so maybe you learn to live with them, which the gears of my brain went, like, what? You're a trained professional telling me that? It's like a TV repairman coming over, like, I can't repair your TV. Maybe you learn to live with it, that it doesn't work. Like, what the hell? Anyway, and then the second thing he said was, well, are you depressed? And I was like, I know where you're going with this. You're going to try to refer me to a psychiatrist, but here's how it works. I don't feel well. And then that bums me out, which I could, because I'm a human being, right? I'm normal. I have feelings, my body's not functioning the way I want it to, and I don't feel well. So it's not the other way around. Depression more or less is you are depressed, and then you also feel bad as a result of that. But anyway, so, 2 years of that, and I finally got diagnosed by a naturopath. So I thought, and then the naturopath was pretty cool about her diagnosis. She asked me to make a week of, like a little journal, a symptom journal, she called it, for 1 week prior to us coming in. So I handed her my symptom journal, and she looked at it and said, I can tell you right now, you got Lyme disease. I'm like, really? And I think I'd had like a Western blot test and tested negative. And I told her that. She's like, we're going to send you to a different lab. So I did test positive. And, for most people in the Lyme journey, when you go 2 years not knowing what the hell is going on with you, and I mean, I was wondering, I thought I was having multiple seizures. I thought it was, I learned about leaky gut, but I got in this big argument with a gastroenterologist. He didn't believe in leaky gut. I'm like, what? It was just weird stuff. But anyway, finally, this naturopath said, okay, you got Lyme disease, so we can put you. And so then she proceeded to pummel me with antibiotics. So while I am always forever grateful that she diagnosed me, she proceeded to almost kill me with going a little bit crazy with the antibiotics. So I saw her, and then I bounced around to some other practitioners. Some of them are famous Lyme doctors in the New York metropolitan area, but they all said the same thing. When I would take antibiotics and not feel well, I didn't know what a Herxheimer reaction was. So, this naturopath was the first one to say to me, are you feeling bad from the antibiotics? Yes, I am. Good. That's good. Tough it out. That's called a Herx reaction. It's a die-off. It shows that it's working. I said, all right, well, what do I do about it? No advice about detoxing or anything like that. Just basically said, tough it out. And, I went for weeks and still wasn't better, and then basically she said, and then all the other different doctors said the same thing: stay on antibiotics until you feel better. And don't even look at herbals, because they're not very powerful and they don't work, and there's nothing stronger than antibiotics. So my health degraded. Being on antibiotics for 6 years is not an experiment I recommend.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
So yeah, I had a PICC line insertion, jabbed my heart. That was one thing. I got a C. diff infection.
Oh,
then, I had 3 PICC lines. 2 more. This is how stupid I was. It's 2 more after the one that jabbed my heart. Stupid or desperate. I was desperate to get better. I didn't know any different. And then I went on multiple oral antibiotics. And after about the 5th or 6th year being on multiple antibiotics, my gut was just so destroyed, as was my immune system, that people will tell you that's where your immune system lies, is in your gut. I got walking pneumonia that was untreatable. So for 3 months I had pneumonia and nothing. So that's when I was pretty more or less forced out of the Western medicine world, because the treatments were just wrecking me. And they only had like a small band of information and ideas about how to treat Lyme disease. And the most fallacious thing was that Lyme, they started with Lyme and thinking that it was just one bacteria. So after I didn't get better the first year and a half, one of my doctors said, well, maybe we'll test you for Bartonella. So I tested positive. Okay, so here's another antibiotic to take for that. And then a year and a half later, still not better. Let's test for Babesia. Oh, you've got that too. Here's Mepron, which costs $400 a month after insurance. And, it was just, I felt like a guinea pig. So I left. I had no advice. I just knew that these so-called experts really didn't have a clue of how to treat this disease. So I didn't know anybody did at that time. This was back in the late 2000s. So I consulted a couple of doctors that are, again, well-known as Lyme literate doctors who do herbal and Chinese medicine, things like that. And I started responding to herbal treatment and started doing better. Eventually I landed on the Cowden protocol, which was the protocol that really got me over the finish line. But here's where the story changes. It goes from a conventional medicinal, allopathic / naturopathic story to, are you ready? Buckle your seatbelts. It goes from the normie world into, the astral world, or whatever you want to call it. So I was completely at wit's end. I didn't know what to do. And, Western medicine didn't have anything for me. So I actually consulted a psychic. I was looking for anything.
That's awesome.
And yeah, well, now I'm of course, why not? But back then it was like a psychic, I didn't tell too many people because, it sounds a little wacky to some people. It doesn't sound wacky at all to me. But yeah, so I consulted a psychic about what to do. And she said some interesting things. I said, which doctor of mine is the one who's helping me? And she said, none of them. I said, what? She said, they're all hurting you, which is what she said. And I said, what about this one? Nope, she's hurting you too. She was the one who was giving me bicillin injections in the butt. God, yeah. I don't know if you know about those, but it's a long needle. They're intramuscular, so they go deep in your butt muscle, and they inject the bicillin, and it feels exactly like somebody hits you with a cane on your butt and on either side to both butt cheeks. And then you usually can't sit down for a day or so.
Oh my God.
So this is the kind of crap I was going through. I laughed to one of my doctors, because he, after I told him what I'd gone through with that and the other PICC line, he recommended another PICC line. I said, aren't there any Lyme treatments that aren't dangerous or extremely invasive? And he just shrugged his shoulders like, no, that's it. That's all we got. And, obviously I know better now, but
right.
That's a bit crazy. And this guy's very well known, by the way. So hopefully
what is that stuff they were putting in your butt cheek? What's that for?
Bicillin. So it's a form, it's like a variation of penicillin.
Okay, gotcha.
Antibiotic. Yeah, that was nuts.
Ugh.
So those were the people, helping me. And the psychic saw it. I was like, all right, well, that's pretty cool. I needed to hear that from somebody who's not connected to this situation, And then, so I'm like, what should I do? And, I stumbled on this story of this guy named John of God. I think Oprah had done a piece on this guy. And I'm like,
Oprah did, really?
Who is this guy? And Oprah did. Yeah, she actually went down there too. But this is a controversial situation. So, when I was down there, everything was cool. So I'm going to tell you the full story. So if you know anything about John of God now, just please reserve judgment until I finish my story, and then we'll come full circle on it. But, at this point in time, I found out about him, and people had gone down to where he has this place called the Casa in Brazil for this extremely powerful energy healing. Now, I got trained to be an energy healer all the way back in 1997, Reiki, and then started just dabbling in it and not doing it, for money or seriously, just doing it on family and friends ever since 1997. So I was open to at least the idea that that's another way to heal. And I thought maybe Lyme disease is one of those weird illnesses that you need energy healing to help you to get over the hump, Clearly, the traditional antibiotics and Western medicine it just bounced off of me, right? And then the herbals got me pretty close to full remission, but then there was something missing. I knew there was something missing. So I went to Brazil, and I had nothing short of a life-changing miracle. So I think the best thing I did was I didn't look up John of God on the internet or YouTube or anything, which would have, you see these polarizing videos. I barely did the research of what, they told us to wear all white and all these other things that, you're down in Brazil and they don't have regular plumbing, so you can't flush your toilet paper down the toilet. And that was the biggest thing I was concerned about, talking about shit. So
Right.
was how I was gonna, take care of that situation. But anyway, so all I knew was this guy was, whatever you thought of him, he was getting results from people. People were having miracles, and I'm not talking just a few. I'm talking thousands. So I'm like, all right, let me try that. So well, actually, back to the psychic. I mentioned John of God to the psychic, and she's like, yes, go immediately. So that's interesting. I couldn't ignore that. So I looked into it and found out, it's a 10-hour flight. It costs a few $1,000s to go, and I'm not doing well. How am I going to do on a 10-hour flight? I'll probably expire, but and then just all the stuff. And then I had to get a visa. And, I was so brain dead at the time, I couldn't imagine doing it. And I just thought, oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go. So I contacted the person who was running the tour down to Brazil. And I said, how long is it? And she said, 2 weeks. And I was like, what?
I said, for 2 weeks.
You have to go down. Yeah, you had to go down there for 2 full weeks.
Damn.
I was like, I don't know. I said, I think I'm just going to go for a week. And this woman was psychic too, by the way. And she said, Gregg, if it's meant to be your time for healing, all these things that seem like obstacles right now, the doors will open. The miracle can start right now. They're just a miracle of getting you down here may be the first part of the miracle. And then the second part will be your healing. So, I listened to that. I was like, okay, that's a nice thing to say. And maybe she's kind of a spiritual cheerleader or whatever, but the freaking stuff actually happened. Like all doors flew open, how am I going to get 2 weeks off of work? But I did, and my family, I'm like, are you okay with this? And my family really wasn't okay with me leaving that long. Cause at the time I had a young daughter. She's only like, 8 years old. And anyway, long story short, it all worked out. I flew down to Brazil, and the place, from somebody from the point of view of being an energy healer, the minute I set foot on the ground where the casa is, all the hairs raced up on my body. The place was just nothing but pure white light energy. I've never been anywhere in the world like it. Completely supernatural. In fact, other people who were down there, some people ended up living down there because of that energy. It's almost addictive. And there's a zone that's about a mile long and about 500 yards wide of where all the energy is. And that's where all the healing takes place. And people have felt, you can feel the difference when you walk out of that zone. So first time I walked into that zone, I was like, oh my God, this is like no place on earth. This is incredible. So anyway, and all you had to do, that John of God is this guy who's called a trance medium. And basically what he did was thousands of people would come, and he would sit down, he would come out first, and he would do these pretty sensational surgeries on people where people would be standing there, and he would cut into people and they wouldn't really bleed. Yeah. And you could be like 3 feet away with your cell phone videotaping, which I did. At first I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. You lifted a woman's shirt, cut into her, and, 1 drop of blood came down, and then stitched her up, scraped corneas with an X-Acto blade on somebody's eye, shoved forceps like 9 inches into a guy's brain, and nothing happened. Just incredible stuff that clearly not normal, right? And then the first day I was there, it's interesting because in my flight down, I recognized this guy because all of a sudden John of God turns around and he goes, by the way, so what he does is he used to come out and say some words in Portuguese, and then he would shudder and he would drop the microphone, and his body would swell up and his eye color would change. And so some being went into his body. You could physically see it. And then he would turn around and people would be standing there, his helpers, with scalpels and things like that. And he would just start working on people. And at one point, he was in the middle of stitching a guy up, and he turns around and he says something like, "Is there a doctor here?" He sensed that there was a doctor in the audience. And this guy comes up, and they pull him out of the audience up on stage. And this guy was on my flight, so I know this wasn't fake. And he mentioned, he's like, "I'm Dr. So-and-so from New Jersey, and I'm here to see what's going on. I've heard about this situation. I'm a doctor, I'm a healer, and this is a type of healing I'm really interested in learning about." So basically, John of God brings him over and with an interpreter, and he says, "Look at this, describe to everyone what you're seeing." So he turns around, and he goes, "Well, I'm seeing, a woman who apparently has not been given anesthesia. She seems to be in a trance state. John of God cut into her, and only one drop of blood came out. He didn't seem to have sterilized his equipment, but this is all going on, and he's stitching her up like doctors have been doing for a couple hundred years, and nobody's flinching. So
damn,
I can't explain this." Yeah. So anyway, so that was some wild stuff. I didn't have to go through that, luckily.
I was just gonna ask,
All I had to do,
what did you have to do?
no, all I had to do was go into a room with about 40 other people and sit down and meditate. And then he came in and issued a blessing. And it was one of the most profound experiences I've ever had. I had I don't know. I had several moments there where I felt the presence of the divine being. I could feel sensations all over my body that felt like electric needles. And then, when it was over, it only lasted about 15 minutes. They said, "Okay, now we're going to put you in a cab and send you back to your hotel." Now, my hotel was a block and a half away. So I'm like, "I'm good. I'll walk back." They're like, "No, you got to take this seriously, as if you've just gone through surgery." They called it psychic surgery. They said, "Get in the cab, go back to your hotel room and go to sleep." I'm like, "It's 10 in the morning. Like, don't talk to anyone, go close your eyes." So I did. And I didn't wake up for like 16 hours. It was, yeah. And when I woke up, my eyes were all dilated. I looked like I'd been hit by a truck. And the worst Herc's reaction I've ever had. And it was emotional stuff going on as well. Like, my ego was completely demolished, and just everything, healing from stem to stern, 360. And I went through that experience like 2 more times down there. So it was a good thing I was down there for 2 weeks, because all this stuff got worked out. And the last time I was there, I woke up one morning and I was washing my face, and I looked up in the mirror and I just laughed, because it looked like me 10 years before. I age regressed like overnight.
That's pretty impressive.
Right. And I get on the iPhone with my wife, and I'm like, "Hey, how are you doing?" She's like, "Oh my God, what happened to you? You look different." Like, she noticed.
Huh.
And I burst into tears. I'm like, I'm healed. Like, all symptoms went away. It was phenomenal. But enough of that. I went home, and they warned us down there. They said, "Listen, this place is it's, let's face it, it's supernatural. You just went through some supernatural experiences. So, a couple of rules about Fight Club here." It's like, don't talk about Fight Club, right? So, they didn't say that, but they said, "Listen, you're going back to the land of heavy energy. So, rule number 1, you don't need to get in arguments with people about whether John of God, what this, don't waste your time. He's going to be fine. You don't have to stick up for him if you want to. So don't worry about that." And then secondly, pay attention to the things in your life now, because now you're coming from a place of just easy light, and now you're going back home to some of the things that probably caused your illness. So you're going to start to notice those, the people, the places, the job that you have, the foods you eat. These things are going to bounce off of you when you get home. So get ready for that. And I ignored that because I thought, I'm healed.
Right.
And, I got home, and in about 6 months, I went back to a very stressful corporate job. I wasn't eating well, and tensions at home and all that stuff. It was just within 6 months, I started feeling some Lyme symptoms creep back. So I was a bit freaked out. So I went back to Brazil again.
What?
I ended up going down 6 times. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so here's what I realized. So I went down there the second or third time I went down there. I started to recognize people. They recognized me. And at first I was like, it's kind of cool. But then this one woman came up and said, oh, are you going to come down here every year and get recharged? And I'm like, I shouldn't have to do that. I should be able to deal with this on my own. That's what they taught us down there. It's like, this love and light and healing energy that you're able to experience it down there unhindered. But the point is you can experience it anywhere. So that's what I realized. So then the other times I went down had nothing to do with my physical healing. It was, I wanted to, become more of a spiritual person. And it was life-changing for me. I went from being a selfish, pretty normal guy to wanting to help people. That's all I want to do now. And then becoming a healing practitioner. That was not on my radar at all. And then, being trained in Reiki took off. It became a whole thing for me. So, the first thing I did was I came back, and I still had my corporate job, and I started the Ticked Off Music Fest. So it was a benefit concert series, because my background is also in music. So I've been writing music, since I was like 14 years old. And I've been in some bands, and one of them got, kind of picked up by A&M Records, like for a minute, and then we got dropped right away. But, so I've had brushes with, some success from songwriting and playing rock music and stuff like that. If you're interested in that, go to thezenengines.com and you can check out my music. All of my music since Brazil has been, informed and inspired by those experiences I had down there. So the first record I released after Brazil is called Obrigado, which is thank you in Portuguese. But yeah, I came back and I thought, my background is event planning. I used to own a magazine in Philadelphia and music. And, so I used to run events. So I'm like, why don't I run these benefit concerts to raise money for Lyme groups? So I did. But the thing is, the first one we did, all these Lyme patients showed up. So that was surprising to me, because I thought I was throwing a big concert with normal people would come out, and normal people, but not sick people would come out to watch the music, right? Not Lyme people. I thought it would be their benefactors or the people who wanted to donate, or people who just wanted to hear good music.
Right.
And but it was 80% Lyme patients. Totally caught me off guard. And I mean, people who are in walkers and wheelchairs and things like that did not expect that at all. So by the second one, it was like loud and clear. Wow, there's the Lyme audience is underserved. Everybody's asking for information. People are asking, what doctors to go to. They're asking for what protocols to do. They're asking me, and I'm running a freaking benefit concert, So I paid attention. So within 2 years, I started the Ticked Off Foundation. So that exists today to help support patients on their treatment. It's really the only dedicated Lyme patient treatment support system that's out there. There are other groups that do similar things, but the main thing we focus on is trying to help patients get better. And we do that through discounts. We get discounts through some sponsors like Nutrimetics, who does the Cowden protocol, and we're working on something right now, hopefully with Cellcore. So, and results RNA as well. So what we do is you come to us and you qualify through the ticktoffoundation.org website. And once we establish it, you do in fact have Lyme through either tests or a diagnosis from a doctor and proof of financial need. We're here to help. And so after I started this foundation, a very interesting thing happened. I contacted Nutrimetics and I said, hey, listen, the Cowden protocol figured really big in my remission. Can you guys sponsor us? Just throw some money at us. And they're like, no. Listen, you're a nonprofit, we're a for-profit. That gets sticky. So why don't we do this? Why don't you qualify people and then you hand them over to us and we'll give them like a really deep discount on the Cowden protocol. I said, all right, that's cool. So the discount's insane. It's like the full Cowden protocol costs $350. The first month with us, it's a total of $40, $310 discount. And then all subsequent months after month one are $150 per month. And here's the wild card factor. So while we were getting this set up, the CEO, Tim Eaton, kept saying to me, Greg, would you like to be trained by Dr. Cowden? I hadn't told him anything about my background or anything that I was interested in any kind of healing. And I kept resisting. I was like, no, I'm good. I'm in the middle of getting this, program set up. And
that story, and I was like, what? You didn't jump on it right away? I'm like, oh my God.
I didn't. No, but I'm glad he didn't stop. So it got to the point where he's like, we'll, pay for your travel. And anyway, so I was, honored to be with 15 doctors and to be trained by Dr. Cowden. And to also have dinner with him, afterwards. And, he was well aware of our program and he, basically said, listen, don't give the protocol away. He said, every patient needs to have skin in the game. They need to be invested in their treatment. So make sure, you can give them discounts and things like that, but don't, it's got to be a two-way street. And I was like, all right, that makes a lot of sense. So that's, so after that, I started the Lyme Recovery Clinic. So I run a for-profit clinic in Connecticut, in Darien, Connecticut, not far from where I live, where I take Lyme patients. So, and not just Lyme patients, it's anybody with a chronic illness. So it started off as a Lyme Recovery Clinic, but then I started doing more and more energy healing. And as that got going, I started to develop an entirely different clientele who was interested in the energy work. So I've had patients have their own miracles happen that have been documented. So I wrote a book called The Gratitude Curve, which came out in 2017. So you can check it out on Amazon. It's called The Gratitude Curve, or you can go to my website, greggkirk.com. So it's GREGGKIRK.com and click on the book link and you'll see, actually, I've got a couple of videos where I read a couple of chapters from the book, but you can see the book there too. So, that was great getting that going and everything. But since I wrote the book, I got more of an audience that were less Lyme patients, but more people who are interested in the energy work. And the second book will be a little bit more about that because there's been some incredible stories about just healing miracles that have happened that unlooked for too. So it's people come in for one thing and then we do an energy session either in person or we can do it over the phone and, just wild healing situations happen. So that's basically where I am today. I run also a website for Lyme patients called LymeKnowledge.com. So I write a lot of blogs. In fact, that's how you and I got connected. Was you liked one of my blogs that I wrote about 7 things that can stop Lyme treatment or Lyme healing. So
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my
7 things. It's not just about the treatment. And then that's I think what drives me crazy in this industry is so many folks are focused on the treatment, and there's so many other things that are in play that you have to focus on in order to get treated and stay in remission. And I love how The Monster Inside Me. Have you seen that documentary yet?
yeah.
So she talks
Yes.
about at the end too, where she stopped eating her healthy lifestyle, right? Went back to the old way, and how she went, back into full Lyme again, and out of remission. So I was just happy to see somebody else. And that Lyme conference we went to, a lot of those doctors were talking about that very thing of how you have to come at it from all these different angles and not just focus on treatment. So I'm glad that message is finally getting out of there.
Yeah.
They almost killed me too with just treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, so I do, consults and everything in my clinic. And that's the first thing that we look at is, of course, I say there's the physical stuff to look at. There's the emotional stuff as well, but then there's the energetic, spiritual as well. So I've gotten such a full range of patients. So, and I put them into those 3 categories. So there's the first patient, can you just handle physical treatment and will that get you better? And yeah, okay, great. Then that's all we need to talk about. But there's also some patients who come in and they've got emotional stuff.
Right.
They've been through a trauma of some kind, it's usually emotional abuse, you name it. And it can be from a long time ago or whatever, but that can be slowing the healing down. So we work on that as well. But then there's some other patients who they come in and they're like, I feel like I'm being bothered energetically by something. I don't know what it is. and we work on those things. And, I've had a really dramatic situation happen. I was doing a residency at a wellness center in the middle of Connecticut, in the middle of the state. And a woman came in and she had been treated for years, and she was very upset. I felt so bad for her because she just tried everything, like most people, like most Lyme patients. Brought in, a file like this thick of all the tests she's had and everything, and all the treatments she'd done. And I looked at it and I said, okay, wow, that's a lot. And she's like, yeah, and I'm still not better. I said, all right, well, let's try energy healing. Let's see what happens there. So we did 2 in-person sessions. I used tuning forks and, laying on of hands and everything. And then the 3rd session she paid for, she wasn't able to come in physically in person. So, excuse me. And so I said, all right, well, that's no problem. We'll do this over the phone. So, and she's like, well, is it that worth it? Is it going to work? I'm like, yeah, sometimes the remote sessions can be even different and better because your body's not there to distract me. I can just tune into your energy body better. So she said, all right. So we did it. And, this is crazy because the woman is Catholic and pretty, while she was open-minded, she had some very strong Catholic beliefs. And one of the first things that came up was I started to see a scene from a past life. And, if you're really staunchly Catholic, you don't believe that, reincarnation is possible. But so I just tested the waters with her. I said, okay, I'm seeing something. It looks like I see your face, but it looks like you're like literally wearing like a powdered wig from 400 years ago, like you're in France or something. And she's like, okay. So she, I tested the water. She's like, okay with that. And then I started to see what she was doing, and it looked kind of like she was a prostitute or something. And I was like, oh, great. So I told her that, and then I saw her shoved down a flight of stairs, and she broke her shoulder. And, we were doing this session to help her with her Lyme disease, but she was also going in for surgery because she had a rotator cuff tear. So as I was telling her this stuff and she was accepting it, her shoulder started to heat up. She said, Gregg, while we're talking about this, my shoulder feels so warm and kind of buzzing. I'm like, hey, that's probably good. So, we ended the session and I didn't think anything of it. And then she came in the next week in person again, and she looked like a different person. She looked great. She was glowing, and she came in and sat down. I was sitting having tea with the woman who ran the wellness center. And we both looked at her like, what? something's different. Like, you look really good. Your energy's just bouncing off the wall. She's like, yes, Greg. Well, here's the funny thing. Like, after our session, I went in, I had rotator cuff surgery scheduled. So I had to go into my doctor and get like a CAT scan because they needed to measure the tear and, get it, prepped for surgery.
I'm a few minutes over. I'm a few minutes over. So if you could shorten the story just a little bit.
I will. Okay. It's about to end. Anyway, the doctor came back. He said, you don't have a tear. It's gone. And we were like, wow. And then she leaned in. She said, Greg, I also don't have Lyme disease anymore, which, being a Lyme patient, that was staggering to me. So that's just one story, and it doesn't happen with everyone. But that opened my mind, being the practitioner, I was witness to this, it wasn't like, I'm so awesome that I created it. I was witness to this situation, and it was just incredible. Just another one of the ways to heal with Lyme disease.
Oh, absolutely. So thank you. And yeah, look for his information that I'll have in the show notes. Check out his book, amazing book, Amazing Healer. I've had a session with him myself. And don't forget to subscribe to Discovering Health FDN YouTube so you don't miss a single episode of Talking Shit with Heather. And until next time, have a healthy day.